Okay, everybody, like I said, continue on with the quiz if you still need more time. I will post the announcements after class. I'll have the slides. I'll put the link to this video if you need to catch up on what we're talking about here. I'm trying to make that a pattern so you can go back and look at it, but please don't rely on that. I might not always record it. Sometimes as I'm recording these, I'm screwing up what I'm sharing on the screen. So please continue to come to the lecture. Don't think you're going to have these slides here. All right, today's agenda, you're obviously taking quiz on chapter 5, which is loops, and we will be looking at that last section of chapter 6, which is advanced string formatting. So again, I think everybody should be really impressed with themselves in terms of what you probably know now that you didn't know before you came into the class. So right now, what do we know about strings? Well, we know all this good stuff here. And it's a little combination of aspects that are generally applicable in any language, or in some cases, specific to Python. So like the negative indexing is specific to Python. But pretty much every language, a string is immutable. A string is a sequence of characters. You construct them the same way. You have some method to determine their length, and then you can manipulate them. And that's maybe a little different in some languages versus others. What today's lecture is going to be on is taking this stuff that we learned in chapter 3, I think it was chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3 on string formatting, where we primarily looked at formatting floats. Here we're going to look at how we format strings in a much nicer way. Those of you who did start working on assignment 5, which I think is due tomorrow night, you were asked to create like a menuing system, and you don't need any of this stuff to do that, but I kind of made it a little painful so that when we complete chapter 6, you'll say, oh, there's a lot easier way to do what I did in that lecture. So what was covered in the lecture on Monday? Well, we covered these different aspects. The concept of slicing, where we said a string is a sequence of characters, and I want to get just certain characters in there. Much like if I had a pie and I wanted to carve up either a little piece of pie or a big piece of pie. Please learn this slicing stuff, because when you're going to see it's going to loop around again. When we get into, we'll go back to dictionaries and lists, you can slice them up too, and it's the same syntax. So if you learn it here, you'll know it there. We talked about the two sides of the same coin, splitting and joining. So if I had a string that was delimited, the tokens were delimited with a separator, we could either split that string up into a list, or if we were given a list of strings, we can join them together. We looked at the classic find and replace, something that you're probably familiar with if you used any sort of word processing editor software. And then we kind of briefly looked at, and to be fair, these were covered in chapter 3, so I really didn't want to spend a lot of time on them. The inspecting, asking if a string is a digit, asking if a string is uppercase or lowercase. And then finally, how you could modify strings. If the string was all lowercase, how you can make it upper. If it was all upper, how you can make it lower. And then there were those two kind of unique ones for Python. The title, which capitalized the first letter in each word. And then I think capitalize just took the first word and capitalized it, something like that. As you can tell, the way I'm addressing that, I'm probably not going to go very hard on capitalize and title. You don't see that in other languages so much. Okay, so the advanced string formatting, right? This is what you know already. And it might look a little foreign, but let's break it down. And I think you'll see, like, oh yeah, I know what that stuff is, right? So let's assume we have a float. So I have a float that has a whole bunch of numbers before the decimal place and then after the decimal place. We all know this syntax. If I wanted to print this out as a formatted string, I would say print, open paren f, and there are my two quotes. And there's my variable name, colon, comma, 2f. And so what we know that's going to do is that's going to put commas in the right place, and it's going to put a decimal point, and it's going to only do that number of digits, 2. So that shouldn't be a big surprise to folks. And I think most people are getting this. We had enough float practice. We said we could format integers as well. So we had integer, we could do something like that, right? And so it just doesn't have the decimal point. We also had some of the more crazy stuff, I dare say. Like here, I wanted to format the integer 8 in binary, if it's a :b. Again, the real takeaway for this type, for the precision, is just be aware that the concept exists. I'm telling you right now, I mentioned this in lecture last time. If you ask me right now how to do scientific notation, I have no clue what it is. I'm going to look it up, right? So I would expect you to do the same thing. But just, you need to understand, like, yeah, there's different ways to do formatting. So that same structure that we just looked at, that same structure was just the green bit, the yellow bit, and the red bit. Field name, precision, and type. We kind of didn't tell you the whole story when we were teaching this. There's 3 other optional parts to this: the fill, the align, and the width. And this is on you. If this is the first time you're seeing this and this is foreign, this is all that's in chapter 6 homework. This is why it's imperative that you do the homework before lecture. I kind of assume you're familiar with this to some degree. So what does that do? If I have some variable like this number, and I try to color code it here for you, this is going to ensure the width is going to say how many spaces should I take up. So here I'm saying the width is 10. Then alignment means if my string is shorter than 10, do I want to push it to the left or do I want to push it to the right? That's the alignment. So that means I want to push it that way. And it's the greater than sign if I want to go that way. And then what character do I want to use? In this case, I want to use that @ symbol. So this string here would produce this. If I take that same string and I just change that greater than or whatever, less than to greater than, and instead of this @ symbol, I use a $sign. I can use whatever I want there. That's going to put $signs on the left and put that number to the right. Okay? So hopefully you can get an idea. This might really help you out, especially like this one. If you're trying to align, if you have like dollars and cents, you're only going to have 2 decimal places for cents, right? That'll align those numbers nice and pretty. The last one that's covered with the align is just this caret. So the little up arrow there. What that means is, hey, put the padding, put the fill to the left and the right. So basically center my text. So in this particular case, this number, I said I want it to be with 8, not 10, right? So that's those 2 digits, or the 2 stars go there and there. There's no magic to this. You just have to play with it. So what you just need to remember, if you're taking notes, if you have your note page with this stuff, like if you have a note page for like format string, this is what you want to sort of write down. And then just what are the values for fill? Honestly, it could be anything. It could be any character. What are the values for align? Greater than, less than, an up arrow. And then what's the value for width? Just an integer, right? The last part of that whole journey is what you already know. You already know the precision and you already know the type. Whether it's a float or a decimal or you want binary, you just drop that in there. So again, I just want to, I was impressed when I put this together. I was like, wow, we really did cover a lot of territory here. This is 20 things that we now know about strings that, in theory, you didn't know before. I put a little cheat sheet here of where you can get more information on this. So I have the direct links out to Zybooks, the lecture slides that we did back in 3.1. So, have a look at that, study it up. I will likely ask you questions on quizzes. I might give you a format string and ask you, hey, what is that going to print out? Or maybe I'll give you the result and say, write me a format string that does that. Also, I might ask you to brute force stuff, right? You should be able to do something like this in a loop. We just learned loops, right? So if I gave you this number, right, you could create a range that just loops for 10, and you printed out your number, and then, okay, well, my number was only whatever, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 spaces long, then just have a condition inside my for loop. All right. So let's see this good stuff in action. And again, as a reminder, as you're doing these assignments, and if I didn't do this, please let me know. All of these freebie 1-point things, you should see solution on them. So if I'm in class and I'm running a little late and I'm like, hey, we're not going to get to this bit, you can always see what the solution is here. But I kind of like to do it live just so you can see us doing stuff. All right. So let's mess around with this a little bit. I have a price list here. Let me pardon. Look this up. I have a dictionary, right, called price list. This is the product. This is its price. Pretty straightforward. Everybody definitely knows this at this point. For item in price list, print out, here's the item. Here's my dictionary, and I'm accessing it with square bracket item, right? As a refresher, we could have done, I gave you this little hint in lecture. What was it? Get items? Let's see if that was it.
Just items.
They're just items, is that what it is? Thanks. My brain is not always in Python. Yeah, thank you for that. So here, I'm doing that same iteration, because I use this items, right? I get this unboxing feature with my key and my value. I get that good thing there. That's again, really useful feature. So please learn this for dictionaries. But to the topic du jour here, I guess let's just move down a little bit. You certainly know this stuff. If I want to print stuff as money, well, there's no magic to the dollar sign. I just put the dollar sign in. Here's my variable. Here's my format string. Right? Now notice this isn't anything new. You already know how to do this stuff, right? This just printed this out. But the whole point of this section in this chapter is for this stuff. That's not really easy to read. All right, so let's start using some of this new stuff. Here, for the first time, I'm going to use this field width. So in this example up here, we just used the comma.02f for put commas in the right places and 2 decimal places. Here, I'm saying :50, and then that's stuff. So what that's going to do is that's going to put, it's going to make sure whatever's here is 50 spaces long. And so if you notice here, we put everything over there. Okay, that's not quite what I want to do to align money, but I did that in an extreme, just so you can see what happens there. So, play with that a little bit. All right. Now, without knowing anything new, really, if I wanted to start formatting stuff a little bit more reasonably, right, I'm leveraging what we just learned in chapter 5. I'm creating 2 loops here. So I'm taking my item, which is going to be the first thing I'm printing out here, and I'm going to print it. I'm going to try to figure out what element in that list is the longest, right? So I'm iterating over and remember, this is a dictionary, so I'm getting the keys. I'm just iterating over each of these keys and saying max length is 0. If the current item I'm looking at has a length that's bigger than my max length, that's the new max length. Again, calling back to something I mentioned in lecture two times ago. This is called the accumulator pattern. I'm trying to accumulate something. This is critical for what you need to do in the assignment 5. So make sure when you're working through assignment 5, you understand, like when you're looping and you have to determine how many characters you have, you might need to keep some variables outside of your loop and change them as you iterate. So in this particular case, I just have this loop, so I get to determine what's the maximum length of this stuff I'm printing on the left. So once I do that here, I'm going to print out the key, my item, here, and then put the padding on the right. So that looks a little bit better. Everything is kind of nice and neat. It's all lined up. But I still have this stupid problem. Like, I put a Lamborghini in here with my shopping list. It's not aligned on the cents. So I guess before I get into how to solve that problem, Arnold, I think we came across this in lab. That whole loop I did here to get the max, there is a really cool feature you can use in Python. I've seen a lot of people use this already. There's this max function. I'm not really going to teach this. You're not required to know this. But as you move into other assignments, as you move into the project, when we get on to that, this is very useful. It's a function that says, hey, give me a list, and I will tell you what the biggest thing in that list is. So if you just blindly give it a list of integers, it will just give you the biggest integer in there, right? Because remember, that list isn't necessarily, it has an order, but you can put in the number 1000 in index 0 and the number 2 in index 7, right? But there's this really cool syntax here where if you have a list of strings, you can say, how do I want to compare the elements in that list? And I can say, hey, I have a list of strings. Compare them using the length function, the len function. So this one line replaces this big old loop up here. So you have it in here. Feel free to take advantage of that. So and you'll see here, materially, that gives you the same thing. It didn't solve our problem, but it made the code a lot shorter, a lot easier to see. Let's take a look at this. Now, I'm going to leverage this alignment symbol for the first time, and also the padding. Just to show us where the padding shows up, I'm going to put this hash symbol in here. Ooh, cool. That's getting better, right? I have a better idea of, where I want these things to line up at. If I wanted to, again, just so everybody's clear, I can put in whatever I want here. If I want to put the letter A in, I can do that, right? If I don't put anything, It's just going to put a space. That's the default there. That's going to be really confusing, you know, especially if you're doing some of the assignments. So you might want to like drop a, you know, whatever, drop a symbol in there while you're developing your code. Okay, hopefully here, I've taken us to the solution. So my ultimate solution to this problem, I used this shortcut just to get the max length for this stuff on the left, right? So I applied that here for the pears, Red Bull, carrots, blah, blah, blah. So that gave me the padding this way. And then here, I said, okay, I'm just going to put in 12. Now, how did I come up with 12? I gotta be honest with you, I just manually measured it. I just looked at it, and that's how I came up with it. I'm not going to give you the answer to how to do that, but hint, hint, you have a pretty good hint right here that's highlighted as to how you might do that. You might see this on a quiz. I might ask you to format a table with dollars and cents and do it dynamically. And maybe I'll throw in a Huracan, maybe I'll throw in an Aventador, which would be in the millions. So your formatting would go off. Okay. So everybody take a breath. We are done with chapter 6. Don't worry. Functions are going to take us about 4 lectures to get through. So we'll back off a little bit. We're going to put off the gas. But buckle up. It's time for exam 2. So where are we? Assignment 5 is due on Thursday. Friday, I will grade homework 6, which is what we're covering today in class. Lab 6, we should be able to complete in lab tomorrow, but I will give some grace until Friday. Maybe you all experienced, I maybe give a little extra buffer on the homeworks and labs, but please try to abide by these dates. Monday, we will have a quiz on strings. Wednesday, 1 week from today, assignment 6 is due. There are about 10 exercises. Those exercises, if you've read the material, should take you about 10-15 minutes each. They're like, some of them are just one line of code. It's like, do you know is digit, lower, upper, stuff like that. But it's going to look like a lot. You're going to go, oh my God, it's not that much. Friday of next week, I will do what I did last time. We will have exam prep. I am doing the exam right now. I'm writing the exam. This is my modus operandi. I create the exam. I give it to the TAs. The TAs tell me if it's good or bad, if it's too hard, too easy. I then make a copy of that exam and I change the questions up a little bit. That's what I publish out here. So you'll have access to that. We can do that in class. I can answer any questions. We can go through quiz results. Next Friday's on y'all. You come to me with questions. Like last time, somewhere next week, I will put extended office hours in the evening, like a 6 to 9, 6 to 10 o'clock block. It was readily apparent to me that people who came to that did better on the exams. So I would take advantage of that if you have the time. Homework, like I said, on Friday, we're going to jump into functions. So get reading on functions. I'm probably not going to get past 7.2, but have a look at it. This is where stuff's going to get really, really interesting and fun. We're almost ready to start our projects. All right, y'all.